In this video, we'll show you how to set up your Cloud9 environment to run a Ruby on Rails app. Now, before you watch this video, I'm assuming that you have been able to set up your AWS account and been able to log in and get to the AWS Management Console. So that information on how to set up and get your account will be given either in another video or another page. So once you're at the AWS Management Console, you can type here Cloud9, and you'll see it, and you can select it from the drop-down list. And you'll be here on your Cloud9 dashboard, and you go ahead and just click Create Environment. Now, the name of the environment, you can name it after our class, CS401, and just any description you want, CS4 run Ruby on Rails. And then after that, you just click Next Step. Now it's really important, we do want to create a new EC2 instance for this. So that's basically a Linux machine in the cloud that you will be able to work on. And so it'll create you a virtual machine in Amazon's cloud that you can work on. We want the smallest one. If you select a bigger one, then that might charge you money. So make sure you've selected this micro instance right here. And then finally, another thing, we want to do Ubuntu servers so that we can use Ubuntu's management system. And you probably want to leave this after 30 minutes to have it shut down. You don't need to set up anything else. Now you can click Next Step. And finally, you could just review, make sure that you're using the T2 micro instance, and that we're using Ubuntu as well. You also probably want to check this. This will hopefully save your money or credits. And then finally, they do warn you we're going to have to use Git to back up our code frequently. And we're also going to have to update our software, which I'll show you how to do. And let's go ahead and create our environment. Now this will take a while for it to get created. And once it gets created, you land on this page. And again, it takes about 3 or 4 minutes for your environment to get created. So just be a little patient. If maybe after 10 minutes it hasn't shown up, then you might have a problem. But make sure you are a little bit patient. And also another thing with the browser you're using, make sure that you allow cookies and cross-site cookies. One browser that doesn't work really well with AWS is the Safari browser. It has some anti-tracking, automated anti-tracking that deletes cookies, and that makes it not work very well in Safari. But Chrome and Firefox should work pretty well as long as you haven't installed a bunch of ad blockers and other stuff that blocks the cookies from getting installed. So here is our terminal window or our command prompt. It's called command prompt in Windows. In Linux, it's called a terminal window. And hopefully you're used to using one of these. If not, look for a link to the video to kind of learn some stuff. But basically, we have over here our folders. By the way, this folder is /home/ubuntu/environment. They call it CS401. That's the name I gave it, but it's really the environment folder. And that is the folder we are on here. So you could do a ls to list out the files, and you can see, yep, we got that README file. Now this .c9, anything that starts with a period is a hidden folder, so that's not why we didn't see it down here. So if we want to go to our home folder or up a folder, we could go cd ... goes up a folder. And if we want to go into a folder, just cd environment. And another thing, you could just type the first few letters and press tab, and it should complete the rest of it. So I'm not a super fast typer. I just press tab and it auto completes it. So hopefully you can get used to that right there. Now, the first thing we want to do is update our virtual Linux machine in the cloud. Now we're using Ubuntu, and unlike Windows and Mac, where there's not one company that distributes software, this is an open source operating system. So what you could do is you can download the source for Linux and compile it, and then you can download the source for all the other software packages that you want to do. Now, the hard thing is there's a lot of dependencies. So let's say that we want to install one program, that might mean that we have to install 5 dependencies. And each one of the dependencies might depend on other things, and we might have to install that. So there's Linux distributions that make it easy to install all of the dependencies so we don't have to download the source code and compile it. And Ubuntu is built off of a distribution called Debian, and Debian uses the apt package manager to be able to install software. So the one thing we want to do, sudo, and just so you know, sudo means we're going to use the root user account. And so that's for only commands where we're changing the system. So only to install software and update will we use sudo in this class. And maybe you might use sudo to configure stuff as well. But then we could just go apt update, and this will download to see if there are any new updates. And then we can go sudo apt upgrade. So slightly different, almost the same word. And that is to actually install these. And so if it says it's locked, just give it a few minutes. Sometimes the Ubuntu or AWS Cloud9 will be trying to update some things in the background. If it's locked, just give it a couple minutes and try sudo apt upgrade again. And now these are all the new things that we can install on it. Do you want to continue? We could click Y. If you notice the Y is capitalized, that means if I just press enter, that's the default. And so it'll take you a couple minutes to install all of the updates. Okay, now that we've installed all the updates, let's go ahead and set up our SSH keys with GitHub. So remember, GitHub's going to be the backup of our code. It's going to keep track of our history. Hopefully you've learned a little bit about GitHub already. So we'll be following a guide that GitHub gives us in order to set up our SSH keys. Now, once we log into GitHub, you can go down here and we can go to our settings. And from our settings, we should see SSH and GPG keys. And then there's this generating SSH keys as a little guide. So you can follow this guide, but you already don't have SSH keys, so you don't really need to check for that. But we can go ahead and generate a new SSH key right here. And here's an article for Linux. Basically, we open the terminal window and we run this command right here. So go ahead and paste that in your terminal and then fix the email address so it's your email address, and then press enter, and it will generate you our SSH key pair. For which file to save the key, we'll just press enter and keep the default. And then this password, please don't forget it, or else you have to just regenerate a new SSH key. What this is for is in case anyone steals your SSH key, they just can't use it. They also have to know the password. So that will create you a new SSH key. Now this part is a little bit optional, but if you don't want to have to type in your password every time you push a commit to GitHub, you can run this command, and that's an SSH agent. And then this just makes sure it's running. Don't worry if you have a different number here, you probably will. That's the process ID number, and it'll be different on every computer. And even if you reboot your computer, it'll be different. And then the SSH add will add the key. It'll ask you for your password, so you type in your password, press enter, and that will keep it. Now, you still want to remember this password in case you need to move this key to a new machine. So you might want to write it down somewhere or put it in a password manager so that you do not forget this password. Now we just need to copy our public key and give that to GitHub. So by the way, what this is going to do is now that we have this key pair, if I give the public key to GitHub, GitHub can verify that it really is me whenever I try to push a commit up to them. And that's how we're going to get away from having to type in a password or even a username. GitHub can automatically identify me by knowing my public key, as long as I keep my private key private. So to be able to get the public key, just type cat, and then we'll do this tilde. You usually shift by the 1 key on a US keyboard, you got that tilde. What that means is the home directory. So in our home directory, there's another hidden folder called SSH where these keys are stored, if you notice that right there. And then you just do id_rsa.pub. Now, there is another file called id underscore RSA without the .pub, and that is your private key. You don't want to give your private key to anybody. You want to keep it private, but we can give our public key to whoever we want, and then they can use that to verify that it really is us. So once they do that, it'll print out all of this on a clipboard. So you can go ahead and copy it and then go back to GitHub and we're going to paste it in. So once again, to find this page, you go to your settings over here and you got the SSH and GPG keys. And from there, we just click add our new SSH key. Now you can give it a name. Since we're doing this on Cloud9, we can give it a name and then paste in everything that you copied. And then by pasting it in, you'll now have the new Cloud9 key added there into GitHub so that GitHub knows your public key. Now finally, we can test our connection with this command right here. And when you press enter, it'll ask you if you trust this connection. And since this is the first time we're connecting to GitHub, we can go ahead and say, yes, we trust this connection. And notice it said you're successfully authenticated, and that means that our GitHub key worked. Now we just need to get Rails installed on our machine, and it's actually already installed. We just need to update it. Now this right here, gem is a command that is kind of like a package manager for Ruby libraries. So it'll gather all the dependencies and install them. So it installs Ruby on Rails, and we're just going to tell it not to download and create documentation. That actually takes a little bit of while, so we'll save ourselves some time. We're basically putting this in a file in our home folder, a hidden file called gemrc, and that just tells the gem command not to create the documentation. So after we've done that, we can type gem update Rails, and it will update Rails. Now this might take a little while. Just be patient and wait for it to complete. Now after it completes, we're also going to update this bundler gem. Now bundler happens to be a gem. Gem update bundler. Bundler happens to be a gem that installs all of our applications libraries automatically, so that's really nice. And to make sure this all worked, we can go Rails-V, and we see that we're on the latest version of Rails. Now, I made this video a few months before you, or maybe a while before you've taken this class, so this version might be different. But if you search and find out the latest version of Rails, that should be your version. Next, we need to install something called Yarn, and Yarn is going to be able to add in our JavaScript and our CSS, so we have to get that installed. And first, we have to install a dependency. And so just the HTTPS app transport, we got to get that installed. And next, we want to add the Yarn library key to our package manager. So that's what this is going to download the Yarn package key, and we're going to add it to apt. So we'll run that. And by the way, this is add, one word. It's got split on that line there. Next, we want to well, this actually adds the public key to so that it can verify this. And now we're going to add the package to apt with this command right here. And again, this is /etc, one word. It's got split there. And now that we've added that, now we can go sudo apt update. And it will update. And then we can do sudo apt install yarn. And this might take a little while, but that will install Yarn for us. And finally, we're ready to create our new Rails package. So we just go Rails new. Now I'm typing to do because I'm making a to-do list. Hopefully you know what you want your application to be, and just kind of come up with a one-word name for your application. And it shouldn't be to do because that's my example. You should be doing something else. So But this command will actually take, it could take a while. It's going to have to compile some dependencies. So just be patient and wait for this command to complete. It could take up to 5 minutes or so. After that ran, and it really does take quite a while for all of this to run, after it ran, you should see a to-do folder or the folder of your app name. Mine says to-do because I named my app to-do. And you can CD into your folder and make sure you run all of your Git commands from this folder. Do not run them from the environment folder, because we might have a couple of applications in here and they'll be in separate Git repositories. So once again, make sure you run all of your Git commands from the to-do folder. And now that we're here, we can go ahead and try running our server. So that's bin/rels s. We'll start up our server and run it. And once we see this use Control-C to stop, our server's is already booted up. So we could go up to this preview right here and we can preview the running application. So we click that and we get here, and it could be a little bit hard to see this, but there's this little button right here to pop it up in a new window. So right here, there's a line of code that we need to add into our application to make this work. So just copy that line of code and go into your application. It's going to be in the config folder in our environments. Now we're in our development environment, and this is, where we're developing our application. This is where our automated tests will run in this environment. And then if we release our application live to the world, that's the production environment. So in that development environment, just double click and it'll open up this new editor right here. And you just need to paste that in probably at the bottom, but before the end. So it has to be before the end. And go ahead and paste that line in. Now, make sure you paste your line of code in, not my line of code. It will be different, and you need your line of code to make that work. So once we do that, go ahead and save. And once we saved, we can hold down Control and press C to stop our server. And then I'm just going to close this so we can see. By the way, if your terminal window ever disappears, don't freak out. Go up to View and show our console again, and it will pop back up. And I think I want to close that one right there. We also actually don't need that one, so I'll close that. And so now we could go bin/rels s to start our server again and wait for our server to finish booting up. And then on this window right here that has the error, we can refresh. And it says, yay, you're on Rails. And that's what you need to do. Now, by the way, a lot of times when you preview your running application, it just doesn't work in this area right here. All you have to do is click this button to pop it in a new tab, and then it works. So instead, it would be nice if we could see our application right here in the same screen, but that's just not working, and I really don't know how to get this working. It has something to do with Cloud9. If anybody knows how, leave a comment in the comment section below, but you can just pop it open in a new tab and get it that way. Now we can use Cloud9 to start our server in a different, and we can always start it on the terminal window, but Cloud9 has this run configuration that we can set up. That way you can just press a button to run it. So let's go ahead and set that up. I'm pressing Control-C, holding down Control, pressing C to stop my server. And now we go up to this run, and we got this run configuration. So we're going to get a new run configuration. And we got to set the current working directory. So go ahead and click that. And of course, that's going to be your application name. So select or your application folder. So select that. And the command that we want to run is bin/rels s right there. And you'll see that it switches it to shell command automatically. And this is just any name you want to give it. Since this is my to-do application, I'm giving it that name. And once I have that all set up, I could just click run. And you could see down here, we got our server booting up. And up here, it popped up a new preview window. Of course, it's not going to work in there, so we're going to have to pop it open in a new tab to see it. But once we have that set up, we can just click this run last. We can click stop to stop our server. We can click run last and it will run it up. It'll start it up again. And so that's a little bit faster than typing bin/rails s. But if this doesn't work, just go back to your terminal window and type that. Now you can always open a new terminal window whenever you want to. So if you need your server running and you want to run some like generator commands, just open up a new terminal window to open up those commands. That way your server can be running in another tab. Now, if you're taking this class from me, there is a link in Canvas that you can click on that will give you a private repository for your application. And this is going to be for your scaffold project. In your assignment, you should be able to see that link. Now, if you notice, you can switch between an HTTPS link or an SSH link. Because we went through the trouble of setting up our SSH keys, this will save us the hassle of trying to having to type in our GitHub username and password every time we push or pull to our repository. So by clicking this right here, we'll use SSH links. Now, we already actually, when we created our application, when we did the rels new command, it actually already created a repository for us. So all we need to do is push our existing repository from the command line. So now back in our application, let's go ahead and just make our initial commit, which is our initial repository. The only change we made is adding this in. But before we go and commit, let's go ahead and configure our username. Now we only have to do this once on the machine. We're configuring it in the global. So as long as we stay on this Cloud9 machine, we won't have to run this again. So that will set our username. And then we also, or our name, and we also want to set our email. And make sure you change this email to your email that you use to sign up for GitHub and press enter. Now, after we have that, we can go ahead and add all our changes. So we can git add-a to add all of our changes. Then we can go git commit-m, and this will be our first commit as our message. And now we just need to set up our remote. So once again, from the instructions on GitHub, and we've clicked this SSH link. Of course, if you want to use HTTPS instead of your SSH keys, you can, but then you have to type your username and password each time you go to push. But you can copy this to add your remote. And if you ever mess up, the remote doesn't work, or you put in the wrong remote, you can search on Google on how to change the remote. We can go ahead and paste that in here. And then finally, we'll just push up our repository from there. And that should push it up. And as long as our SSH keys are all working, no username and password required, and we pushed it back up, going back to GitHub, we should be able to refresh. And we should see our application up here. And Rails even created a README. Whatever you do, don't make changes here. If you want to change the README, go back here and change the README down here instead. So that way, if you change it up on GitHub, then you'll have to pull down the changes and possibly deal with conflicts. So it's better to just change it all here, unless you learn more about dealing with conflicts with Git. So from now on, when you make changes to your application, the 3 steps to commit is you do git add-a. That's step 1. I haven't made any changes. And then step 2, git commit-m, and put in your commit message here. Make sure it's the right commit message, that it's a present tense verb. And then after that, you just need to do git push, and git push pushes your changes from your local repository on your Cloud9 machine up to your GitHub, and that will make your backup. So once again, you run these commands after you make changes to your application and you want a backup of it, you want to push it up to GitHub, you run those 3 commands. So thanks for watching this video. Hopefully now you're set up to start developing your first Rails application.